The universe had never known a force as terrifying as the Thraxians. Ancient and relentless, they had swept across the galaxy, conquering planet after planet, until entire systems bowed to their will. Their fleets were vast, their weapons devastating, and their thirst for dominion insatiable. For millennia, no race had dared to challenge their rule, until humanity arrived on the galactic stage. At the edge of the galaxy, in a small, unremarkable solar system, humanity had made its mark. Earth had just entered the galactic fold, eager to explore, to trade, and to learn from the more advanced species they encountered. But that ambition was soon met with resistance. The Thraxians, seeing humanity's potential for rebellion, sought to crush them before they could ever gain a foothold. The Thraxian invasion began in the early days of humanity's space exploration, when Earth's colonies on Mars, Titan, and beyond had barely begun to flourish. The first strike came without warning. An overwhelming fleet of Thraxian warships appeared without any diplomatic communication, sending humanity's outposts into chaos. Entire colonies were reduced to ash in hours, the screams of the innocent lost in the void of space. The Thraxians were quick to assert their dominance. They issued an ultimatum to the newly formed United Earth government: submit or face extinction. The human race had no choice but to comply, but their spirit was not so easily crushed. In the heart of Earth's capital, the leaders of the United Earth government convened in a desperate meeting. The odds were stacked against them. The Thraxians were far too powerful to challenge head-on, yet there was something burning in the eyes of the human representatives: defiance. Admiral Naomi Harper, the leader of Earth's military forces, was the first to speak. "We can't let them dictate our future. We won't let them wipe us out like they did to so many others. There must be a way to fight back." Her words resonated with every leader in the room. The idea of surrender was unthinkable. Earth's citizens had fought too hard to reach the stars, to let their future be decided by a race of alien invaders. Harper's plan was simple but audacious. They would create a rebellion, a united resistance that would rally the galaxy's oppressed species. Humanity, though outnumbered and underpowered, had one advantage the Thraxians didn't: adaptability. Humans had always thrived in the face of adversity, their ingenuity and resourcefulness unbound by the limitations of other species. They could innovate, strategize, and, most importantly, inspire others to join their cause. As Harper and her team began rallying Earth's forces, a message was broadcast across the galaxy. It wasn't just a call for help, it was a declaration of war. "We will not bow to tyranny," Admiral Harper's voice echoed across the stars. "We will rise, and we will fight for freedom. The Thraxians may have destroyed our colonies, but they will never destroy our spirit." The message struck like a lightning bolt across the galaxy. Far beyond Earth's borders, in distant star systems where other alien races had lived in fear of the Thraxians, humanity's defiance sparked a flame. Resistance movements that had long been silent stirred to life, and previously neutral species began to see the glimmer of hope they'd been waiting for. On the far side of the galaxy, in the mining colonies of the Zelrath, a ragtag group of workers heard the broadcast. For years, the Thraxians had kept them underfoot, forcing them into backbreaking labor to fuel their war machine. But now, there was a chance to rise. Tasha, a former Zelrath engineer, clenched her fists as she listened. She had lost her family to Thraxian raids, and the words of Admiral Harper echoed in her soul. This was it. This was the moment she had been waiting for. "We have to join them," Tasha told her fellow workers. "Humanity is fighting back, and we can help. We've been oppressed for too long." Elsewhere, in the wilds of the Krovan homeworld, a similarly powerful movement began to form. The Krovans were an ancient species of warriors who had once ruled the stars, but the Thraxians had driven them into hiding. Now, the Krovan chieftain, Varric, saw a chance to reclaim his people's honor. "We will not let these invaders dictate our fate," Varric growled, addressing his council. "Humanity shows the courage we have lost. We will stand with them, and together we will take back our freedom." As the galaxy trembled under the shadow of the Thraxians, the spark of rebellion began to burn bright. Humanity had ignited something far larger than itself, an unstoppable force that would spread across the stars. But the Thraxians were not fools. They knew that the fire of rebellion had been lit, and they would do whatever it took to extinguish it. The war for freedom had only just begun, and the first battle would soon be fought not in the vast emptiness of space, but on Earth itself. The rebellion had begun. The air on Earth's capital, New Cairo, crackled with anticipation. The United Earth government had made a bold decision. The time had come to launch the first coordinated strike against the Thraxians. Though Earth's military forces were vastly outmatched by the alien invaders, Admiral Naomi Harper's determination to ignite the rebellion burned brighter than the fear of failure. Humanity had taken its first steps toward a war they might not win, but they would fight with everything they had. Humanity's strategy was unconventional. Rather than relying on brute force, which would have been hopeless against the Thraxian fleets, they had devised a series of targeted raids aimed at destabilizing Thraxian supply lines. If they could strike at the heart of the Thraxian war machine and force them to spread their forces thin, they could buy time for the rebellion to grow. The first target was a key Thraxian supply depot located in a remote system known as Solaris 4. A covert strike force, comprised of a mix of Earth's best soldiers, local resistance fighters from the Zelrath and Krovan, and a handful of engineers and technicians who had learned to modify human technology for guerrilla warfare, was assembled. Their mission was clear: destroy the depot, disrupt the Thraxian supply chain, and send a message to the galaxy. Harper knew it was a risky move. The Thraxian fleet patrolled Solaris 4 regularly, and their warships were equipped with advanced tracking technology. But she also knew that a successful strike would send shockwaves across the galaxy. If humanity could show that even a small force could stand up to the Thraxians, it would galvanize the rebellion into something unstoppable. The strike force, led by Captain Elias Drake, a seasoned Earth veteran with a reputation for defying the odds, boarded the stealth assault ship Vanguard. With its cloaking technology, the ship could slip past Thraxian patrols undetected. But the mission was still perilous. One wrong move, and they would be annihilated before they even reached the depot. As the Vanguard approached the Solaris system, the tension aboard the ship was palpable. The crew had trained for this moment for weeks, but no amount of preparation could remove the fear of facing an enemy as brutal as the Thraxians. Drake stood at the helm, his hands steady on the controls, though his mind raced with calculations. Approaching the system, "Captain," reported Lieutenant Mira Song, the ship's navigator. "The Thraxian fleet is on its usual patrol route. We'll need to stay in the asteroid field for as long as possible to avoid detection." "Understood," Drake replied, his voice calm but firm. "Stay on course, and prepare for evasive maneuvers once we make our move. We can't afford to be caught." As the Vanguard entered the asteroid field, the crew held their breath, navigating through the rocky labyrinth with precision. Time seemed to slow as they neared the Thraxian supply depot, a massive structure floating near a barren moon. It was heavily guarded, with several warships stationed in orbit. The odds of success were slim, but the spark of rebellion was strong, and humanity was prepared to fight for it. The strike team, made up of Earth's elite soldiers, Zelrath rebels, and Krovan warriors, descended to the surface in smaller, faster dropships. Their mission was to infiltrate the depot, plant explosives on the critical power cores, and leave before the Thraxians knew they were there. They would need to move quickly, every second counted. As the dropships touched down in the shadows of the depot, the team disembarked and moved with stealth, using the terrain and their training to avoid detection. The Zelrath's expertise in sabotage, combined with the Krovan stealth tactics, made them an effective force. The human soldiers, though fewer in number, brought with them advanced technology and a will to succeed that was unmatched. They reached the power core of the depot, a massive facility surrounded by Thraxian guards. The Krovan warriors took the lead, silently dispatching the guards with their deadly precision. The Zelrath engineers worked quickly to plant the explosives, while Captain Drake kept watch, his rifle trained on the horizon for any signs of Thraxian reinforcements. It was a delicate operation. The slightest mistake could mean the difference between life and death. But the team pressed on, undeterred. As the last explosive was set in place, Drake's voice crackled through the comms. Time to move. Everyone, fall back to the extraction point. The team made their way back to their ships, their hearts pounding as the timer on the explosives ticked down. The Thraxians had not yet noticed their presence, but that wouldn't last long. Just as they boarded the last dropship, the ground trembled beneath their feet. Boom! The power core detonated in a massive explosion that lit up the sky. The Thraxian supply depot was obliterated in an instant, sending a shockwave through the entire system. The Thraxians would know they had been attacked, but by then, the Vanguard and the rest of the strike force had already vanished into the stars. As the crew of the Vanguard made their way back to Earth, their mission a success, they knew they had done more than just strike a blow against the Thraxians. They had proven to the galaxy that humanity was not a race to be underestimated. The rebellion had begun, and this was only the first step in a war that would reshape the future of the galaxy. The Thraxians would retaliate, of course, they always did. But now, humanity had shown them that they would fight to the bitter end. The spark had ignited, and there was no turning back. The explosion at the Solaris 4 depot reverberated through the entire Thraxian Empire. For the first time in millennia, the invincible war machine had been struck, and its underbelly exposed. The loss was not just material, it was symbolic. The rebellion had not only harmed their supply lines but had also dared to challenge their reign. It was an act of defiance, and the Thraxians, for all their might, were not accustomed to such challenges. Aboard the flagship Vengeance, Supreme Commander Malthar was fuming. His clawed fingers trembled with rage as he surveyed the holoscreens showing the aftermath of the attack. The once pristine depot now lay in ruins, its power core shattered. The humans had pulled off something the Thraxians thought impossible, an organized, well-coordinated strike against their dominion. It wasn't just Earth's forces who had fought, it was the united resistance of several oppressed races. This was bigger than just humanity. It was a galactic uprising. Find them, Malthar growled to his officers. Find the humans responsible for this. I want their blood spilled across the stars. And I want every resistance cell eradicated. Malthar's second-in-command, Captain Vraxer, a cold and calculating officer, stood to attention. We've already initiated our search, Commander. But this was no ordinary strike. The humans, along with their allies, used stealth tactics we haven't encountered before. We believe they had help, other species. They may be more coordinated than we anticipated. Malthar snarled, his eyes glowing with fury. Then we crush them all. No mercy. No surrender. This rebellion will be crushed before it spreads. The Thraxian war machine, an empire built on domination, was swift to respond. Within hours of the Solaris 4 attack, they unleashed a full-scale retaliation. Planetary bombardments began in the border systems, where resistance movements had begun to take root. The first target was the Zelrath homeworld, where the Thraxians had long known there was a simmering resentment against their rule. The Zelrath had been mining resources for the Thraxians for centuries, and their blood ran hot with the memories of generations enslaved. On the surface of Zelrath, the skies darkened with the approaching Thraxian warships. They were vast, looming like the weight of inevitable doom. Their massive energy cannons fired without mercy, leveling entire cities, their once proud monuments to the Zelrath people reduced to rubble. The resistance, which had been emboldened by humanity's first strike, was now forced to fight for its very survival. Yet, even as the Thraxians overwhelmed the Zelrath defenses, there was a glimmer of hope, an ember that refused to die. In the heart of the resistance, Tasha, the Zelrath engineer who had once sworn vengeance on the Thraxians, stood alongside her comrades. She had been with the rebellion since the first whispers of Earth's defiance had reached her home. Now, the flames of resistance burned more brightly than ever. We knew they would come for us, she said to her fellow rebels. But we will not go quietly. As the Thraxians' destruction rained down, Tasha and her team worked frantically, using the ruins of their home to create traps, sabotage the Thraxian ships, and send out encrypted messages to the other rebel cells. She had seen what the Thraxians were capable of, but she had also seen something else, something far more dangerous, the unyielding resolve of those who had been oppressed for too long. Far away, in a hidden underground base on Earth, Admiral Naomi Harper watched the news feeds. The Thraxians were retaliating, and the death toll among the resistance was mounting. But even as the flames of destruction raged across the galaxy, Harper knew something that the Thraxians did not: the spark of rebellion could never be extinguished. "Prepare the next phase of the campaign," she ordered her staff. "We'll need more than just sabotage now. The galaxy needs to see that we are a threat, that we will not be cowed by these monsters. We will strike them where it hurts." Captain Elias Drake, who had led the strike on Solaris 4, stood by Harper's side. "What's the plan, Admiral?" he asked. "Hit them where their pride lives," Harper replied, her voice hard with resolve. "We're going to attack their flagship." Drake's eyes widened. The Thraxians' flagship, Vengeance, was their symbol of power and might. The thought of facing it in open battle was daunting. But Harper was right: if they could destroy the Vengeance, they could break the Thraxian morale and show the galaxy that they were not invincible. "The Vengeance is heavily guarded," Drake cautioned. "We'll need every ship in our fleet to have a chance." Harper nodded. "It's a risk, but it's the right one. The galaxy is watching us. We can't afford to fail." Back on Zelrath, Tasha and the surviving Resistance fighters watched as the Thraxian ships began to leave their world. The Zelrath were not broken, not yet. The message had been sent: the rebellion would rise, no matter the cost. And as the first signs of a counterattack against the Thraxian fleet reached them, Tasha felt something she had not allowed herself to feel for a long time: hope. The Thraxians had started this war. But the galaxy was no longer afraid. The rebellion had become a force too powerful to ignore, and the humans, along with their allies, were ready to make sure the Thraxians understood the price of their tyranny. The stage was set. The rebellion was no longer a spark, it was an inferno. And nothing would extinguish it. The galaxy had never seen a battle like the one that was about to unfold. The Vengeance, the Thraxian flagship, was a behemoth of war, a massive, indestructible symbol of the Thraxian Empire's might. Its sleek, obsidian black hull was fortified with advanced shields and weaponry capable of annihilating entire fleets. It was more than just a ship, it was the center of Thraxian power, and its destruction would send shockwaves across the galaxy. Admiral Naomi Harper's plan was simple, but its execution was anything but. To strike the Vengeance, humanity's fledgling rebellion would have to go up against the full might of the Thraxian war machine. The mission would be the most dangerous humanity had ever undertaken, and the odds were overwhelmingly stacked against them. Yet, there was no other choice. The Thraxians had already proven that they would stop at nothing to crush the resistance, and now it was time to take the fight directly to them. The fleet that Harper had assembled for this daring assault was small, just a handful of human ships, along with a few of the resistance fighters who had joined their cause. The Krovan warriors provided a few of their battle-hardened warships, and the Zelrath, though still recovering from the Thraxian reprisal, had sent their best engineers and fighters to assist in the attack. Their mission was to cripple the Vengeance, to pierce its formidable defenses, and to strike a blow that would echo across the galaxy. Captain Elias Drake, the man who had led the first successful raid against the Thraxians, stood at the helm of the Vanguard, the flagship of Earth's forces. He looked at the stars ahead, his face steely with resolve. The plan was risky, but he knew the cost of failure. If they did nothing, the rebellion would die before it even had a chance to grow. They had to show the galaxy that the Thraxians were not invincible. "Admiral," Drake said, his voice low over the comms, "we're ready." Harper's voice crackled back through the static. "Proceed as planned, Captain. This is it. No turning back now." The attack on the Vengeance would begin with a full-on assault, but it wasn't just about brute force, it was about precision and timing. The Vanguard and the Allied ships would make their approach under cover of a nearby nebula, using its dense clouds of gas and dust to hide their movements. Meanwhile, the rest of the fleet would create a diversion by launching a series of hit-and-run attacks on nearby Thraxian patrols. The goal was to keep the Thraxians off balance long enough for the main assault to reach the flagship. Drake's fingers danced over the controls as the ships navigated the perilous approach. The Vengeance loomed ahead, an enormous black structure that seemed to suck the light from the surrounding stars. It was everything humanity feared, and everything they had to destroy. The first salvo of missiles launched from the Vanguard was aimed at the outer defenses of the Vengeance. But the Thraxians were prepared. Shields flared to life, and the missiles exploded harmlessly against the energy barriers, the shockwaves rippling out like waves on the surface of a pond. "Damn it!" Drake muttered, his grip tightening on the controls. "They've adapted faster than we thought." The Thraxian flagship fired back, its massive turrets unleashing a barrage of plasma bolts that tore through space like molten spears. The Vanguard rocked as the first wave of attacks hit, the shields flickering as they absorbed the incoming fire. A sudden jolt sent the crew sprawling, but they held their ground. The battle had just begun. "Deploy countermeasures," Drake barked. "All ships, engage evasive maneuvers. Don't give them a chance to lock onto us." The fleet scattered, using the nebula's cover to reposition and strike from unexpected angles. But even with their agility and advanced technology, they were vastly outgunned. The Thraxian warship's firepower was overwhelming, and their shields were near impenetrable. If they didn't act fast, the human fleet would be obliterated before they even had a chance to land a meaningful blow. On the surface of the Vengeance, the Thraxian Supreme Commander Malthar watched the battle unfold from his command center. He stood in front of the hollow panel, his eyes burning with the desire to annihilate the insolent humans and their allies. This rebellion, he thought, would be ended here, once and for all. "Launch the interceptors," Malthar ordered, his voice a low growl. "The humans will not get another chance to strike." Hundreds of Thraxian fighter crafts surged from the belly of the flagship, their sleek forms darting toward the human fleet. They were fast, deadly, and far more advanced than anything humanity could muster. The odds were growing slimmer by the second. But just as the battle seemed to reach its boiling point, the unexpected happened. A small fleet of Krovan warships, which had been waiting in the wings, emerged from the opposite side of the Vengeance. Led by their chieftain, Varric, the Krovan struck with brutal force, engaging the Thraxian interceptors and creating a breach in the flagship's defenses. "Now!" Captain Drake shouted. The Vanguard surged forward, its cloaking devices flickering on and off as it weaved through the chaos. With the Thraxian forces distracted by the Krovan counterattack, they had a brief window of opportunity. The Vanguard shot forward at full speed, its weapon systems locked onto the Vengeance's critical systems. Missiles, laser blasts, and plasma bolts rained down on the Vengeance as the human fleet pressed the attack. The Vengeance began to tremble, its shields flickering and faltering under the pressure. Harper's voice came through the comms once more, "It's working, Captain. Keep pushing." But just as victory seemed within their grasp, the Thraxians retaliated with a vengeance. The battle for the Vengeance was far from over, but for the first time, the Thraxians were beginning to realize something: humanity would never be easy prey. The battle for the Vengeance had reached a fever pitch. Every shot fired felt like a death sentence, and every maneuver could be the last. Yet, in the midst of the chaos, something began to shift. The Thraxians, despite their immense power, were starting to falter. The human fleet, though outmatched, fought with a tenacity that rattled their invincible foes. The Krovan warships were doing their part, keeping the Thraxian interceptors occupied long enough to allow the human forces to strike with precision. Captain Elias Drake watched as the Vanguard hurtled toward the Vengeance, its weapon systems locked onto the flagship's weak spots. The shields were flickering, finally showing signs of wear from the relentless barrage. This was their chance. "Hold steady," Drake muttered to himself, his hands steady on the controls. "We're not backing down now." Behind him, his crew worked with a frantic urgency, firing on all cylinders to keep the Vanguard intact. The Vengeance was a massive fortress, but now, for the first time, it seemed as if the humans might actually be able to breach its defenses. The Krovan forces, fierce and relentless, were relentless in their pursuit of the Thraxian ships, drawing attention away from the human vessels and creating gaps in the Thraxian formations. And now, Drake knew, it was time to capitalize on that distraction. "Target their reactor," Drake barked, his voice cutting through the comms. "We've got one shot at this." The Vanguard's missile bays opened, and the ship's sleek form became a blur of motion as it flew straight toward the heart of the Vengeance. The enemy flagship loomed larger and larger, and the human fleet moved in synchrony, surrounding the behemoth on all sides, keeping its defenses preoccupied. The plan was simple: overload the reactor. It was the Vengeance's lifeblood, its heart, and if the humans could take it out, the ship would be finished. It would create a chain reaction, and the explosion could cripple the Thraxian fleet in this sector. "Reactor locked on," shouted Lieutenant Mira Song, the Vanguard's navigator. "Firing in 3, 2, 1. The missiles streaked toward the Vengeance, their engines glowing bright as they tore through the void. The first wave hit, followed by a second, and then a third. The massive flagship shook violently as the explosions hit their target. For a moment, there was silence, then a roar as the Vengeance's internal systems began to fail, the reactor destabilizing under the relentless pressure. "Direct hit." "We've breached the core," shouted one of the crew members, his voice tinged with disbelief. Drake felt his heart race. This was it. This could be their moment. But the Thraxians were not so easily beaten. As the Vengeance began to crumble, the remaining Thraxian forces retaliated with a ferocity born of desperation. The Vengeance's flagship cannons, still operational despite the damage, fired one last time. The blasts rained down on the human ships, hitting them with pinpoint accuracy, shattering hulls and sending debris floating into the void. "Captain," cried his communications officer. "We're losing ships." Drake gritted his teeth, his grip tightening on the controls. "We can't stop now. Keep up the pressure." The Vanguard surged forward, weaving between the blasts, the human fleet closing in as their target continued to burn. The Thraxian fleet was staggering, their pride and strength shattered in front of them. The humans, with their relentless spirit, had shown the universe that the Thraxians were not invincible. At the heart of the chaos, Commander Malthor's eyes were wild with fury. His flagship, Vengeance, was crumbling, and it was clear that the Thraxians had underestimated their enemies. The humans had done the unthinkable, they had dared to challenge the might of the Thraxian Empire, and now, they were paying the price. "We are pulling back." Malthar roared to his subordinates. "All remaining ships, retreat. The Vengeance will fall, but we will not let this rebellion spread further." But it was too late. The damage was done. The Vengeance's reactor, overloaded and unstable, began to implode. The explosion was cataclysmic. For a brief moment, the stars themselves seemed to shudder as the flagship disintegrated in a blaze of glory. The shockwave rippled outward, devastating everything in its path. The Thraxian fleet faltered, losing its flagship, its guiding force, in one catastrophic moment. In the wake of the explosion, human ships surged forward, exploiting the chaos, striking at Thraxian warships that were now disorganized and desperate. The Thraxians had been forced into retreat, their fleet in disarray. On Earth, Admiral Naomi Harper stood before a display of the ongoing battle, her face grim but resolute. She knew that the Vengeance's destruction was a victory, but it was only one battle in an unrelenting war. The Thraxians would not give up so easily. Their empire would retaliate with everything it had. But now, humanity's rebellion had a symbol. They had struck at the heart of the Thraxian might and survived. "We've made our mark," Harper said to her officers. "But this is far from over. The galaxy knows we can win now. We'll keep pushing, until we take everything they've built away." The rebellion was far from over, but for the first time, the tide had truly begun to turn. Humanity, against all odds, had struck a blow that would echo throughout the galaxy for years to come. The Thraxian Empire was wounded, and though it might still be dangerous, humanity had proven it was no longer a race to be overlooked. In the cold, dark expanse of space, the first signs of victory shone. And it was a victory that had been earned with blood, sweat, and the unwavering resolve of those who refused to bow before tyranny. The galaxy was in motion. The destruction of the Vengeance had sent ripples through the Thraxian Empire, but it also galvanized the resistance. Humanity, once seen as a weak and insignificant force, had proven that it could not only stand against the might of the Thraxians but strike devastating blows when the opportunity arose. The first cracks had appeared in the seemingly unshakable Thraxian war machine, and the rebellion, fueled by victory, began to spread like wildfire. Admiral Naomi Harper stood before the war room's massive display, her eyes fixed on the shifting lines of the galactic map. It had been a week since the Vengeance's destruction, and though the Thraxians were in disarray, they were far from defeated. Their retreat had been strategic, pulling back to regroup and lick their wounds. Harper knew it was only a matter of time before the Thraxians launched a counteroffensive. The real battle for the galaxy had only just begun. "Admiral, the resistance forces in the Cerberus system are ready," Captain Elias Drake said, stepping up beside Harper. "We've got enough ships for a coordinated attack, and the momentum is on our side." Harper's gaze hardened. "The Thraxians won't let that momentum last. We hit them here, and they'll hit us harder where it hurts most. But we have to move forward, show the galaxy that we're not backing down. If we wait, we lose the initiative." Drake nodded, his jaw set in grim determination. "We'll hit them fast. We've got to catch them while they're still reeling. The longer we wait, the stronger they become." The next phase of the rebellion's campaign was already in motion. The human fleet, bolstered by their allies, had made their way to the Cerberus system, a strategic hub within Thraxian-controlled space. The system's proximity to several key trade routes made it an ideal target, and the Resistance was planning to seize it, no matter the cost. Harper knew that if they succeeded, it would disrupt the Thraxian supply lines, severely crippling their ability to wage war across the galaxy. The fleet gathered outside the Cerberus system was a mix of human ships, Krovan warships, and Zelrath fighters. The Resistance had united under a common cause, and their combined firepower made them a formidable force. The Thraxians, however, would not go down without a fight. "We've received intel that the Thraxians have deployed reinforcements to the Cerberus system," Lieutenant Mira Song said, studying the latest data on the holographic map. "They're expecting us." Harper exhaled sharply. "Then it's time to surprise them." The battle began with a flash of light as the Resistance forces dropped out of hyperspace and into the Cerberus system. The Thraxians were waiting, but they had underestimated the speed and precision of the attack. The first salvo of missiles rained down on Thraxian patrol ships, tearing through their defenses before they could properly engage. The humans, aided by the Krovan ships, surged forward, striking with the fury of those who had nothing left to lose. The Thraxians retaliated almost instantly. The black-clad warships of the Empire fired their plasma cannons, sending deadly beams of energy streaking through space. The battle in the Cerberus system was unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. Explosions lit up the dark void, and ship after ship disintegrated as the two sides clashed with everything they had. The Thraxians fought with a cold, brutal precision, but the humans were no longer the underdogs. They had learned the art of war, and they had learned it quickly. Captain Drake led the charge, his ship maneuvering through the chaos with sharp, calculated movements. Every shot from the vanguard found its mark, each blast chipping away at the Thraxian forces. But even as the Resistance pushed forward, Harper knew that the Thraxians would not allow themselves to be overwhelmed so easily. They had too much pride. They had too much power. "They're sending in their reinforcements," Song reported. "We've got more ships on the way. We need to finish this quickly." Harper's eyes narrowed. She knew that if the Thraxians managed to regroup, the battle could swing in their favor. She had to act fast. "Push them to the edge," she ordered. "Hit their supply lines, disrupt their fleet's command. Don't give them a chance to reorganize." The human fleet surged forward with newfound ferocity, the coordinated assault striking at the Thraxians' critical assets. One by one, the Thraxian ships were taken down, their shields collapsing under the weight of the human onslaught. The Krovan ships were relentless, tearing through the Thraxian interceptors and clearing a path for the human fleet to push deeper into the system. But even as the Resistance gained ground, the Thraxians retaliated with their trump card, the Dreadnought-class warship, Relentless. This ship, unlike any other, was a floating fortress, a symbol of the Empire's unyielding power. Its weapons were unparalleled, its armor nearly impervious to anything the Resistance had at their disposal. The battle for Cerberus would not be won until the Relentless was destroyed. "Admiral, we can't face that thing head-on," Drake said, his voice grim. "We need to find a way to weaken its defenses first." Harper's mind raced. The Relentless was too powerful to take down in a direct confrontation. They would need to exploit its weaknesses, its engines, its shield generators. But where? "Focus fire on its aft section," Harper said. "We'll draw it into the asteroid field. There's enough debris there to hide our movements." The Resistance fleet regrouped, moving toward the asteroid field surrounding the Cerberus system's outer rim. The Relentless followed, its massive engines propelling it forward with crushing power. As the battle intensified, the human fleet used the asteroid field to their advantage, weaving between the debris and launching surprise attacks. For a moment, it seemed as though the Thraxians might have the upper hand. But as the Relentless entered the field, the humans struck. "Now!" Drake shouted. The human forces unleashed a coordinated barrage on the Relentless's engines, disrupting its shield grid and crippling its speed. The Relentless's defenses faltered, and in a final, desperate move, the Resistance launched their last missiles toward its core. The explosion that followed was like a star collapsing in on itself. The Relentless was gone, taking with it the last semblance of the Thraxians' overwhelming dominance in the system. The galaxy would never forget the day the Relentless fell. The Thraxians had been dealt another blow, but the battle was far from over. Humanity's rebellion had reached new heights, but there was still much to be done. The war was escalating, and the Thraxians would retaliate with all their fury. But now, the galaxy knew something it hadn't known before: humanity was a force to be reckoned with. The Cerberus system had been a decisive victory for the human resistance, but the war was far from over. The destruction of the Relentless had crippled the Thraxian forces, but it also enraged their leaders. The Empire would not tolerate such an affront to their authority. The galaxy, once trembling under the weight of Thraxian tyranny, now found itself on the brink of total war. In the aftermath of the battle, humanity's forces were reeling. The Resistance had taken a beating, losing many ships in the fierce fighting. The Krovan warriors, though fierce, had suffered heavy casualties. But amidst the debris and the smoke, something had changed. Humanity's spirit was no longer the underdogs, it was the flame that lit the path forward. The Thraxians had come to realize that they had awakened a force they couldn't easily extinguish. Admiral Naomi Harper stood on the bridge of the Ardent Hope, the flagship of the human resistance, staring out at the broken remnants of the Cerberus system. She was tired of the bloodshed, the loss, but she knew what was at stake. Humanity had fought too hard to fall now. The stars, once symbols of fear and subjugation, had become beacons of hope. It was time to strike again. "We've received intel," Lieutenant Mira Song reported, her face grim. "The Thraxians are gathering their forces for a final push. They're assembling at the Zorith Nebula. It's their last bastion in the sector. If they manage to regroup, they'll come for us with everything they've got." Harper's eyes narrowed. The Zorith Nebula was a notorious location, a natural fortress of dense gas clouds and asteroid fields. It was an ideal place for the Thraxians to regroup and launch a counteroffensive. If they succeeded, the Resistance would be wiped out in a matter of days. "We can't let them get away with this," Captain Elias Drake said, standing beside Harper. "The Thraxians will strike with everything they have left. We need to take the fight to them first." "We do, but this time, it's all or nothing," Harper replied, her voice cold and determined. "We make our stand here. If we fail, there won't be another chance." The plan was risky, but it was their only option. Harper and her allies knew that the Thraxians would not hold back. They had already lost too much to let this rebellion continue. The human fleet, battered but resilient, was all that stood between the galaxy's future and the iron fist of the Thraxian Empire. As the fleet assembled near the edge of the Zorith Nebula, the tension was palpable. The final battle would unfold in the heart of that treacherous region, where the Thraxians would have every advantage. The nebula's shifting gases would obscure vision and communication, and the asteroid fields would make precise targeting nearly impossible. But Harper wasn't afraid. This was where humanity had to make its last stand. "Ready the fleet," Harper commanded, her voice steady, the weight of the decision settling in. "We push them back, today." The human fleet, now bolstered by the best of Earth's resistance forces, entered the nebula, the dark clouds of gas swirling around them. Every ship was a symbol of defiance, its hull scarred by battle, its crew battle-hardened and ready to face what would come. The Krovan ships were at the front, charging headlong into the unknown, their warriors roaring for vengeance. The Thraxians, sensing the humans' arrival, were prepared. Their own fleet, though diminished, was still formidable. They had massed every remaining warship at the heart of the nebula, their supreme commander, Malthar, vowing to erase the rebellion once and for all. "We've got them on the radar," Lieutenant Song reported, her fingers flying over the console. "They're right in front of us, prepare for engagement." Harper's heart pounded as the ships drew closer. The Zorith Nebula was a place of chaos, where vision and sound were distorted, and every move had to be calculated carefully. But it was also the perfect battleground for humanity's final stand. If they could use the nebula's natural cover and break through the Thraxian lines, they might just have a chance. The first shots rang out as the two forces collided. The human fleet surged forward, their ships darting in and out of the nebula's shifting clouds, using the asteroid fields to their advantage. The Thraxians responded with devastating force, their plasma cannons lighting up the dark space like deadly fireflies. The battle was a blur of explosions, lasers, and missiles, each side relentlessly attacking, knowing that only one would leave the nebula alive. "Target their command ship," Drake ordered. "Take Malthar down. If we can break their command, we can break their resolve." The human ships focused their fire on the Thraxian command vessel, a massive dreadnought that loomed like a shadow in the nebula's mist. The Thraxians fought tooth and nail to protect their flagship, but the human resistance, despite their losses, was relentless. Every shot was fired with purpose, every maneuver calculated for maximum impact. As the battle raged on, Malthar's voice echoed across the comms, cold and taunting. "You think you can defeat the might of the Thraxian Empire with nothing more than your fragile ships and petty alliances? You are nothing." But as Malthar's words rang out, it became clear that his confidence was faltering. The Thraxian forces were being pushed back, their ships scattered and broken under the unyielding force of the human assault. And then, the moment came. With a final coordinated strike, the human fleet managed to pierce the Thraxian flagship's defenses. The Nemesis, Malthar's personal command ship, exploded in a cataclysmic blast that rocked the nebula itself. The Thraxian forces, without their command structure, disintegrated into chaos. The final blow had been struck. The nebula, once a symbol of the Thraxian Empire's strength, now stood as the graveyard of their ambitions. Humanity had done the impossible, they had overthrown the Thraxian Empire. As the last of the Thraxian ships retreated into the darkness, the Resistance fleet lingered, their victory hard-won but undeniable. The battle was over. The Thraxians had been defeated. Admiral Harper stood silent, staring at the stars. The cost had been immense, countless lives lost, families torn apart. But the war had ended, and humanity's future was no longer shackled by an alien empire. The galaxy, though scarred, now belonged to those who fought for their freedom. And as the human fleet drifted into the quiet aftermath, one truth echoed across the cosmos: the rebellion had won. The galaxy would never again be the same. Humanity had proven that, no matter the odds, they would always fight for their freedom, no matter the cost.